So according to the workshop manual, if we've changed the oil filter, we need to be looking at putting 3 litres of oil back in this. So I've got a 4 litre can of bottle of Castrol, what's this called? Castrol Power 1, which was recommended, and there is 4 litres in here, so it will go by the dipstick as well, but we'll get a fair bit in for a start. So at this point it's worth just, before we do too much, just make sure there's no oil absolutely pouring out the bottom, just so we can be reasonably sure that we've done everything up. There is a marker on this bottle, tells us we want to get it right down to 1 litre, but red. You know what, it never ceases to amaze me how often you follow the instructions exactly when it comes to how many litres of oil to put back in a bike after an oil change, and sometimes it just never needs quite that much. I suppose it's because there's always inevitably going to be some left in the sump, etc. So I tend to not put in quite as much as they suggest, and then measure on the dipstick. Obviously we're going to have to check it in anyway. Once the engine's been running for a few minutes, you see that's not far off up that dipstick, look. Just rest that on the top, we're going to push it all the way in. Well, that's really not far, according to that, as much as it needs to put in. But I'm guessing once we've run the engine up for a bit, it circulates around and fills the oil filter. So that's what I've put in so far. Yeah, according to this, this needs another whole litre, but I'm sure it probably will by the time we've done. But I don't want to overfill it and then have to take some out. Yeah, I mean that is up to the top of that dipstick now. But it's over the top of the dipstick. I'm going to go with that for now, and then we'll start it up and we'll run it for a little bit once we've done the tappets, and then we'll check the oil level again. But right now I don't want to put any more in than that because I don't have to start draining any out. So you just see me remove the seat, the tank, which is just 1 bolt, and pull the petrol pipe off the tank, so we can remove the tank. I've removed the left hand side cover to expose the rotor so we can see the timing marks. We're doing the valve adjustments. There's 2 screws holding the rocket cover on, which I've taken out, one this side, one the other side, and then there's this breather pipe at the top here, so we just need to get rid of that so we can take our rocker cover off, and then we can get to the valve so we can do our timing adjustments. See if we can get this off. Come on. Oh, okay, it's come with the... I should have put it off first. There we go. Okay, so that's that off. Instead of messing around, just take this coil off altogether. Move it completely out of the way. Does that make it any easier? Yes, that's what we should have done in the first place instead of struggling. Okay, so what that has done, as you can see, is it has left behind our rubber gasket here. So we'll take that off as well. That's a reusable gasket. Obviously been siliconed in place before, so we're going to have to clean that off, and we'll probably go back on with some well seal or something on there instead of silicone. So we'll just move that out of the way for now. We'll clean that up before we put it back on. So now we can see our valves and the adjusters on the top. And so what have we got on this? I've not had one of these apart before, but so we've got so we've got 3 valves per cylinder on this. We've got 1 exhaust valve, and we've got 2 inlet valves per cylinder on this. So actually, so you know what's up? Something I should have done. I mean, I haven't on this, but whenever you take spark plugs out, if you've got any compressed air, just blow around that hole first in there, but before you take your spark plug out, because you know what it's like, you get road grime, you get little bits of stones, all sorts that can end up sitting on the surface in there. And if you take your spark plug out and any of that falls in, and it's a hard stone or something like that, you can say goodbye to your piston and your compression. So I would just blow that out with compressed air normally. Like I said, I did actually forget on this one, but please don't hold that against me. So that's what we're looking at adjusting. Let's reference the manual, find out what feeler gauges we need and where we need to set our timing, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so next job is checking the clearances. Allegedly these were done not that long ago, and as that cover was relatively easy to come off, I suspect that might be the case, but always worth a check. So we've got to rotate our rotor until, if we work on this side first, this piston is to be at top dead centre on the compression stroke. So let's rotate it and have a look at what's happening. So as we go down, I'll just, if I shine a torch down into, I can see what's going on. Right, piston's going down, and now the piston's coming back up, and our exhaust valve is opened. So we were on the compression stroke. Now the exhaust valve is opening, and the piston's coming back up. That will be our exhaust stroke. To the top. So that's at the top of our stroke there, and then it starts to go down as it starts to go, or gets to top dead centre I should say, which is, so we've got a T mark on here, and there's a small index mark in there, and that is actually top dead centre, and that exhaust valve closed. Now as I start to go over that top dead centre, our inlet valves are opening, so that means that's our intake stroke. So right now, as this piston's on its way back down, these valves are opening and they're drawing fuel and air mixture into the piston. So when that gets to the bottom of its stroke, and as it starts to come back up, which is now, these will close, and this is our compression stroke. So we're going to go around till we get to our T mark lines up, like so, and they're all got play in them. So I know that's the compression stroke on that cylinder. The other cylinder, the other side, although this is a parallel twin and both the pistons going up and down at the same time, that side should now be on the exhaust stroke. So I think so. All these will be closed, which they are, but these are open, so we need to check those. Right. So exhaust first should be 0.14 millimeters. I've only got a 0.15 here. It's 0.14 plus or minus 2, so 0.15 is fine. And if we put that in there, there's a little bit of resistance there. Oops. Back in. Yeah, there's no up and down moving in that, and that's nice. That's a nice sliding fit. I can just feel a bit of resistance. So that is where it's supposed to be. The inlet valves should be, just refer back to the book. The inlet is just 0.1 of a millimetre. So we'll find the 0.1. There it is. And we'll try that in our inlet valves. no up or down movement in that, and it's a nice sliding fit. Don't forget there's 2 inlet valves per cylinder, and that one is the same, which is good. Means we don't have to adjust them. It doesn't mean I don't get to play with my new adjuster tool though. So I'm going to go around and check the other side when that's on top dead centre of the compression stroke. So I'm going to have to go 360 degrees on this to get to that stage. And then we'll move on to the next thing. Right, so it turns out on this side, we're now on top dead centre. And we can see there's a fair bit of movement on those. And the inlets are meant to be pointing in. Just turn this additional light on, see if it helps. And with my 0.1 feeler gauge in there, don't know if you can see that, but there's a lot of up and down play in that. That does need adjusting, which means I do get to use my new tool after all. Let's take that out of the bag. So normally I just use a screwdriver in the screw and a spanner on there, but this tool in theory makes the job easier, and it's meant to fit a lot of Hondas as well. But if you watch the Yamaha SRX, be trying to do it on a Yamaha SRX, that's got a stupid little square on the top rather than a screw, which is even worse, because I just couldn't find anything in my toolkit to fit on that at all. So I was messing around with a spanner that just didn't fit properly. That was a nightmare. Anyway, so I'm going to drop that on there. Move that pipe out of the way. That'll sit in there in the screw, which it does. Yep. I'm hoping this is going to make my life much easier. Right, so we'll just crack off that nut. Ooh, that's tight. Ooh, that was properly tight. And then we'll just drop the feeler gauge in between there. I'm hoping you can see some of this. Like so. Right, and then I'm going to hold that tool with the palm of my hand, not put any weight on this screw, and just turn the screw. So I've got some light bit of contact on that, and then just tweak that nut up. Just check that. No up and down movement. Nice and light for that makes life so easy, this tool. If you haven't got one of these tools, then you've got to seriously go and get one. That's made my life so much easier. I just want to try it. I just want to try it on all my bikes now. While we've got this open, we may as well just have a cursory look around, check everything out. There's plenty of oil in here, so I think we can assume there's plenty of oil getting to the top end. The nuts, bolts rather all look in good condition. Cam chain isn't moving around unduly. From what I can tell, looks in good condition. The cam chain tension on this is a semi-manual system. Just underneath on the back of the cylinder block, there's a single nut right in the centre below the carbs, and you get the engine up to idle speed, and then you undo that nut, which is a bit odd while it's running, but you undo it while it's running. It then tensions itself, and then you do the nut back up, and that's it. That's all you have to do, but obviously you do have to remember to actually do it. I did do it on this before. I've come in here to do these, so I did it in other words before I started stripping all this down, because you want the cam chain tension properly, really, so you know that when you put your piston at top dead centre, the rockers and everything are exactly where they should be, so you can get the measurements right. So that was all done first, then we've done this, and this should always be done before you do a compression test or before you sink your carbs. Okay, so I'm going to pull this back together, rocker cover back on, left hand cover back on, and then I think what we'll do next is, before we go any further, we'll do a compression test. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we can do a compression test, which basically involves putting a flexible tube into our spark plug hole, like so. Connecting the gauge onto the end. Making sure we're zeroed, and then we open the throttle wide open, and we see what reading we've got. Now, I've generally always been disappointed on any bike I've tested compression on, because I think this gauge reads quite low, but the important thing is what you're looking for is a very similar compression, ideally on both sides. So I'm going to put the plug back in on the other side. Actually, I'm not going to leave the plug out, and I'm just going to ground it out though against the case, because I don't want you can damage the coil if you don't do that. So turn the other lead, do the same with that. Ground that one out as well. Okay, and then hopefully we won't damage the cores. So the way you do this is you open the throttle wide open, crank it over on the starter,
wide open,
and then when that needle stops
choke
moving,
closed,
that's basically your highest compression that you're going to get. So if I can just hold it while we crank it. Ignition's still on, throttle wide open, let's crank away. Okay, so that one we have 120 and the other one was just over 115. So there's only a few pounds difference, so I'm basically happy with that. What we could do now is we could just put a little 5ml of oil down the spark plug hole, turn it over again, see if our piston rings are... It's basically, we put oil down there and turned it over again and the pressure reading went up. That would suggest that the oil is sealed around the rings and you know, we might be looking at new rings or whatever. But to be honest, I'm not going to bother with that because I know this bike runs well, it starts well. I don't think there are any issues there. So we're going to leave that there as far as the compression test goes. So the next thing to do, I think, is gap our new spark plugs in, connect that breather back up, and get the bike warmed up to temperature, and then I think we're going to be looking at balancing cars. So everything's bolted back up together. I've put new spark plugs in, run it up to temperature, checked for leaks, everything seems absolutely fine. So I've also rechecked the oil level. I've added some more oil in to bring it to the top of the dipstick. It's only taken 2.5 litres when it said it should take 3 with a filter change, and I've found this no end of times. You know, it could just be that there's less volume available in the engine because there's a load of sludge in the bottom or whatever it happens to be, but it's quite often the case with old bikes. So don't necessarily go by the book. Put it in up to the level of the top of the dipstick, run the engine up to temperature so the filter fills up, recheck it, back to the top of the dipstick. At the end of the day, that's the only correct measurement. So I have a lovely cup of tea, which means we can now start on the synchronization. So I'll show you what I've got set up as far as that goes. So fuel tank off, obviously. We have a, if you like, a donut or a little fuel tank up here, which is connected to our fuel inlet, and then we've got our carburetor synchronization dials. We're only using these two on the right. Obviously I could do a 4-cylinder with this, but we're only doing the two on the right, so we're using these two, and these are basically connected to this point down here on the head where the carburetor inlet is, and this large spiky bit here is just an attachment out of the carb sync kit. So you take a screw out of there and you put this in instead, so you can attach a pipe. And the same is true of the other side. This one's probably easy to see. There's a screws come out of there. I've attached this, tighten this up, and then put the pipe on which runs to the gauge. Now you don't always have to use these. Quite often on for instance Kawasaki's, there's like a cap here, and you pull the cap off and then you just put the tube straight on to the pipe that's left sticking out of here. But in this case you have to screw this guide in and put these on. So the plan here is to start this up, not touch anything to start with, and see how close we are and whether the carbs are synchronized. I'm hoping they will be, because I was told they had been done before the bike was purchased, but you know, you can't tell sometimes. So I'm looking for basically both those right hand gauges to be as close to each other as possible. If not, we'll need to start to do some adjustments, but let's see where we'll start with. Let's start up and see what we've got. So temporary fuel tank 2 on, ignition on, make sure everything else is out of the way. See what we've got. swap things around so that I'm using the 2 centre gauges, because I've got a strange feeling there might be something wrong with this right hand gauge, which I'll need to look at off camera. But anyway, let's start it now, see what we've got. Right, they're basically near as damn it the same, so I'm not even going to bother making any adjustments to that. Next thing to do is to alter the pilot screws for our air mixture. It looks like they were running really rich, so it's in for lean, out for rich. So I'm going to have a mess around with that once I've taken these off, and then so pilot adjuster screw is that screw just there, and then underneath the left carb there's a matching one on the right carb. So what I've done is, with the engine ticking over, now the carbs are synchronized, I've altered those in and out. In makes the mixture leaner, out makes it richer. It's better to slightly on the side of caution with a richer mixture, because if it's too lean the engine can overheat and seize. It was very rich though, so I have leaned those out a little bit. It does seem to be ticking over better, less lumpy. I've altered the tick over back to around about 1200. It says between 1200 and 1500, but I've gone for about 1250. So I've still got the temporary fuel tank on. I'll just let it start up, hear what you sound, so you can hear what it sounds like. Then I'm going to put it back together, go for a test ride. Okay, so final update for today. I was hoping that this was going to be the last part of the service on the Dream, but it turns out the bike had other ideas. I've just been for a test ride, and the bike was going really well, and no real issues. But then about 3/4 of the way into the test ride, I tried to go into neutral, couldn't find a neutral light, even though it was in neutral. I then realised that in fact none of the electrics were working at all, so I had no kind of illumination at all, no headlight, side light, instrument lighting, indicators, nothing was working. Bike was still running though. So turned around, came home, started looking around, noticed the main fuse, which is this one here, this top one here I should say, had blown. So okay, maybe one of those things. Didn't have a 15 amp, all I've got is 25 and 35 at the minute. So I tried a 25 in there, blew it straight away. So okay, be logical, have a look at what you've done. Obviously I've had the tank off, so I've checked all the cables around here. I then came round to this side and I checked the connectors that I'd had undone here. Everything seems fine. Had the coil off, checked that, make sure I've not trapped any wires or anything like that. Everything seems perfectly okay there. So tried another fuse, blew that one as well. And it happens as soon as you switch the ignition on. Even with all the lights off, it still blows it straight away. So I've had the headlamp off, because the only known fault I've seen on occasions is the headlamp used to go dip beam used to go on and off sometimes. So I've had that out. I've checked, or very quickly checked all the wiring in there. Interestingly, one of the indicator wires is loose. The other one seems to go into the loom. I need to check on the diagram, but it goes to a pale blue. So this ought to go to an earth, I guess, but it's not connected. But the indicator itself is presumably earthed via this, because there is an earth lead going to this, which is connected to that. So anyway, what it boils down to is I seem to have fixed the oil leak. However, the bike has, or is blowing the main fuse. If it had done it as soon as I put the bike back together, then I would assume it was something I'd done while I've got it apart like this. But as I went for a ride for about, I don't know, 40 minutes, and it was absolutely fine with all electrics working, then suddenly they stopped. I'm wondering if it's just another fault that's developed, but we'll have to wait and see. The other thing I did was I whipped the plugs out and had a look, and they are very, very white. So that indicates I've made it far too lean. So I'm going to have to sort that out as well. That's an easy fix. That's just a question of turning these pilot screws out to make it richer. They need to come out a bit more. I think that's the right way around. I'll check in the book anyway. But yeah, both of them are very, very white, so that's not good. So that needs sorting out. But right now, time's getting on. I can smell my roast dinner cooking. I've already started on the beer. And yeah, that's it for today. So, hope you liked the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe down below. And obviously, I'll see you in the next one. And hopefully, I'll have found the cause of the fuse blown.